Hey guys, welcome back to Dad's Van. Today I'm going to be cutting and installing this bamboo plywood as part of the overhead shelving in the van. What I'm going to be working on first is the bottom of the shelving, and since I used 1010 series 8020, I've selected 1/4 inch bamboo plywood. Now 1/4 inch bamboo plywood is cut exactly to 1/4 inch, 0.25 inch. The channel on 10 series 8020 is 0.256, so it's just a little bit bigger. So that's going to allow this to slide into the slot on the 10 series. Now to cut this bamboo plywood for the overhead shelving, you're going to need a couple of tools. One, you're going to need a large T-square. Two, you're going to need a tape measure, or if you want something a little more accurate, you can use a straight measure like this. You're going to need a jigsaw, and you're going to need a wood cutting blade. There's different types. There's coarse and fine. I think that the fine does a nicer job of leaving the edges smooth, but we can also sand those down if they're a little too rough. And then, of course, you're going to need a pencil for tracing out the lines you want to cut. Okay, here's the 10 series or 1010 series 8020 that is going to be part of our overhead cabinets in the van. I've already installed all that. I got another video for that you can check out. But what we're going to be doing today is cutting and installing the bamboo plywood that's going to go in the channel here to make the floor of the cabinets. This channel width is the 0.256 per the 10 series drawings. And we have one cross member in the middle here, so we're actually going to cut two panels. One that's going to go in here and one that's going to go in down at the end. Okay, now when measuring for your panels, you're going to want to measure the distance between the 80/20 bars. In this case, I've got 10.5. But then when you're cutting your panels, you need to also account for the depth of the channel on both sides. So in my case, this dimension is going to be 10.5 plus the depth of these channels. And then similar, when I measure from here to the other end, I need to add the depth of the channel to that, times 2 to that as well. All right, so for our measurements, I have my 28.5 by 10.5 distance for each panel between the bars, but I have to account for the channel depth of 0.323 on each side of each of these dimensions. So 0.323, the closest we're going to get to that is about 5/16. That's 1/4 inch plus a 16th. That gets us 0.3125, leaving just a little bit extra, so it's not too tight of a fit. So what that means is on each of our dimensions, we're going to need 2 of those 5/16. So that would equal 5/8 on each of them. So we're going to cut 29.125 by 11.125. All right, when measuring things out, you can use a tape measure. It's accurate, but there's a little bit of error there sometimes just with using the tape measure. So I want things to be really precise. I'm going to go ahead and use this flat measure here. And then always double check your measure. All right, next get your T-square, line it up on the edge of the wood. All right, for longer dimensions, longer T-square. And then keep in mind also with your lines where you're going to be cutting. So in my case, the line is exactly my measurement, so I'm going to be following the outside of that line. We can't exactly slide this in because of the length in the front of the van, but we can get it into the channel like that. And then because we've disconnected the support, lower support on this side, we can just stretch this forward and pop this in. That. We're going to use this piece of cardboard to scribe this out. So we need to first kind of get this in here and trim it down so we can get it close enough to scribe. So I'm going to probably just cut this whole corner off. Alright, so I just have a regular old compass here. I took the sharp point off just so it doesn't cut the headliner. And then the key here is to just keep the angle of that I'm tracing here with the compass fixed. Ideally straight up and down or straight left and right would be the best. Alright, so that gives me a trace here. I'll cut this out. Alright, we got this cut out using our scribing. We cut this out. And then I had a bunch of extra, so then I drew a line down the back to line up this edge. And then the last thing I'm going to do is just trace out the bottom here. There you go. And you have to do that. You have to get this curve, you got to get this line, and you got to get this line. In my case, there's also a curve right here. So you need to trace all those out and then just keep adjusting your cardboard down till you get as good a fit as you can. When we cut the wood, we'll mark it, cut it a little bigger, and then fit it, and we'll sand it down to get it just right. But we need to get this template as just, as close as we can so we can trace it and use that as a starting point. The other thing I noticed in my van is originally I thought these would be all the same for my cabinets, and they're not. So if you're lucky, maybe a couple of them will be the same, but in my case, they are all just a little bit different. So make sure you do a template for each one. All right, next up we're gonna drill out the holes that will allow this to mount on there. drill a really small hole to start. All right, so the hardware it's gonna hold these panels on is 1/4 20. So I'm gonna go ahead and, now that I've succeeded with my pilot hole here, I'm gonna use a 7/32. A little bigger. I'm just gonna give this panel a final sanding. All right, now when deciding how to cut these, I suggest you first measure and cut one a little bigger than you might need, and then we can figure things out and make adjustments. So in my case, I'm planning to go from the headliner here down to a little bit down here, maybe 1/2 inch, so that's 14 inches. And then depending on the hinges, if when I open it, it rubs a little too much, I'll just trim that down in terms of the height. And then in terms of the width, I've decided I'm going to cover up the end caps here. So I'm going to go from here all the way down, and then half of this is 1 inch, so I got to count for a 1/2 inch, but probably a 1/16 less, so that the door on the next one will also be a 1/16 less than a 1/2, and then we'll end up with an 1/8 inch gap between the two cabinet doors. So in my case, that comes out to about 30 1/4 minus a 1/16, and 14 on the vertical. All right, so if you have a giant T-square like this, it's a drywall T-square, it makes round lines a lot easier. All right, next we're going to be doing this hinge installation for our cabinet doors. Now, in order to attach this hinge to our 10 series, we have to insert some T-nuts in the channel. So I've taken off the end board and popped out the locking nut here. And I'm going to insert 4 of these T-nuts into the channel, since I'll have 2 hinges per door, so I need, and each hinge requires 2 screws, so I'll have 2 T-nuts here, 2 T-nuts here, and then we'll repeat this for the other side. All right, so I am using these Chibury 90-degree RV cabinet hinges. There's a link to these in the video description. It's a really nice hinge. It does pack a lot of power, but unfortunately with my 3/4 inch bamboo plywood, which is pretty heavy, for my cabinet doors, it takes 4 of these to keep it up. So keep that in mind. Also, the instructions on these not great. You can see I had a lot of trial and error figuring out exactly where I want to place these. With my 10 series, in order to get this to mount to the 10 series with a 1/4 20 bolt. I had to drill these holes larger. You can see I tried several trying to get the overlay where I wanted it. Ended up going with this one. Ideally, I would have wanted to use that one, but I could not fit a 1/4 20 bolt in that hole to mount into the 10 series rail on the overhead cabinet frame. That would have given me a little bit better overlay. You know, with 10 series, it's a 1-inch extruded aluminum, so these hinges can only do at most a 3/4 inch overlay, and to achieve that you'd need the bolt to be about right where that guy is, maybe even a little bit further. So unfortunately there wasn't a hole that matched up perfect, so I went ahead and used this one, which didn't give me the overlay that I really wanted, but it still looks great. I'd have to find a hinge that can do a 1-inch overlay to improve on that. All right, so we got our van cabinets doors built. But these doors, as you're driving down the road, there's nothing to latch them in. So you want to have some kind of latch, keeps it locked so that if things, you know, you were to get in an accident, stuff doesn't come flying out of the cabinets. I used these cork zinc alloy compression latches that I found on Amazon. And they're pretty nice. It's a really nice product, good materials. The way these work is they go, I have one installed here, they go on your cabinet door, and when you shut it, this little lever arm pushes out and it'll compress on the inside of this cabinet frame here on the back side here. And then when you push this lever in, it'll pop out and release the compression, and that allows you to open it. All right, next up I'm going to be cutting this cabinet door to fit this cork compression latch. Now it's super important that you go inside the van and take measurements so you know exactly where to do the cutout for this. In my case, since my cabinet door at the end of the cabinet covers up not just the 10 series but also the 1/4 inch of the end cap, I needed to set this in, the cutout needed to be set in 1.5 inches from that end. That's for the cabinet doors that cover up end caps. In other cases where I place a cabinet door with the latch in the middle, so not covering up an end cap, the measurement was shorter. But for this cut, we'll be doing it on the left side, and we'll be doing 1.5 inches in. And then similar from the bottom, you want to measure up from the bottom of your cabinet frame to where your cutout needs to be. In my case, that's going to be 1 3/8 inches. That's the distance from the bottom of this to where I want this latch. Now you can place these latches in lots of different orientations. I chose to put them in the bottom corners. You can put them up higher in the middle. You can do them vertical if you want. As long as that compression arm is going to be pushing up against part of your cabinet frame when it's locked, you're good to go. Alright, so before cutting these bamboo doors, you want to lock this down with some C-clamps so things aren't moving around while you're cutting. All right, just so you can see this, I've traced the cutout for mine because I'm covering the 1/4 inch end cap, the 1 inch 10 series, and I want to make sure that compression latch will, or compression arm will push on that 10 series. This is for me 1.5 inches in. And then up from the bottom, the height of mine, I need to be 1 3/8 inches. And then the rectangle just follows the manufacturer's drawing, 1 inch high, 3 3/8 long. All right, now we're going to be cutting out the cutout for the latch using a jigsaw. But to get a jigsaw started in the middle of a board like this, you got to get a drill. You need to get a drill bit that's at least as thick as your jigsaw blade, and then just pick one of the corners and don't go outside of the box and drill a hole. Before test fitting these, you do have to take off this securing bracket. Alright, so we've got the cutout here, and here's the latch. So we're going to go ahead and check the fit. Looks good. Couple of gotchas with these. I had 3/4 inch thick bamboo cabinet doors, and I'm using 10 series 80/20, which is 1 inch thick. So these are not designed to cover that much range. This, you want this to be flush on the front of your cabinet face. So you need, in my case, 3/4 inch. Then you need, there is an adjustable plunger here, so you can set the depth, but the max this can do is like, I think almost 1 inch. But the total of, the 1 inch 10 series and the 3/4 inch thick bamboo, it was too much for this. The only way I could get it to work was to actually take this compression arm completely out, and without that it would work. And so that's what I've got here. You'll see I don't have the long adjustable compression arm on it, so I just have this bare metal that's going to go up against the 10 series here. But that's okay. I can put a little piece of Teflon tape there to kind of quiet it, but it does the trick. So yeah, I don't know if you're able to see that, but that's what it looks like. All right, we've got our overhead cabinet doors cut. We've got the hardware installed. We've test fit everything. We know it works. So now what we need to do is seal this wood. And the first step in doing that is actually going to be remove all hardware. All right, once you have all the hardware removed, next thing you want to do is give it a light sanding. I recommend a 220 grit. Just go over it, give it a light sanding on both sides. And I'd recommend just doing this on all the wood you plan on sealing, so all the dust will settle, and then you can just go back through and start sealing them. When you're sanding, I highly recommend you wear a respirator. There's going to be a lot of fine dust. You don't want to breathe that in. It's going to irritate your lungs and your nose. So make sure you use a respirator. sanded this, you want to go ahead and get a microfiber cloth and wipe it off real good. If it's a little bit damp, that also helps. And that'll just make sure that we remove any wood dust particles before we put that sealant on. Now what I'm going to be using to seal these is a water-based spar urethane. I like this product because it allows the natural color of this wood, this bamboo plywood, to show through. So it doesn't really have any stain. This is a clear satin finish, so it's not glossy. And it's water-based, so it doesn't off-gas and smell really bad. That's something I don't want in a van, or any kind of chemical smells. So I highly recommend water-based spar urethane. Spar urethane also holds up really well to UV light. And since this is a recreational vehicle, we're out on the road, we often have windows and the sliding door open. These cabinets are going to see some sunlight. So we don't want them to discolor or fade over time, and the UV protection in the spar urethane will help us with that. All right, we're getting ready to apply the water-based spar urethane. I'm going to take the tag off temporarily. You can see this kind of has it's white in appearance, but you'll see here when it goes on, it's clear. And we just want to go up and down, make sure your brush strokes follow the wood grain. Make sure you get the edges. Make sure you don't get too much on there, or it can dry kind of gobbed up. So you just want to keep it real thin, real light. If you want to do multiple coats, you can. You can do a light sanding in between each coat to get a really nice finish. That's what I did on the dining table, the Lagoon bamboo tabletop. I'm not going to do that on these because these are actually going to have some cabinet liner on top of them. So I'm not too worried about it. I just want to make sure they're sealed. So these are only going to get one coat. All right, then you got to do one side at a time. So set it aside, and it takes about an hour to dry with this Bear product before you can flip it and do the other side. These cabinets will vibrate and make some noise, and we don't want that. So we're gonna put one of these rubber bumpers here so it doesn't rattle against the frame. Just kind of hold it there for 15 seconds with a little pressure. Look at that, no more vibration.